All right, everybody, welcome in. If you're watching on YouTube or on the live link or on LinkedIn, welcome to the party here. We have Zeke with us from Data Speaks. We're going to be talking about attribution in the world of AI and how we're going to use that. I'm super excited to understand another perspective because we deal with clients every day, from software to ecom to everything, and Zeke has a very unique perspective, I think, about how to kind of take action on these things. But before we get started here, Zeke, the first question I always want to ask is what did you have for breakfast this morning?
I had a protein shake and a coffee.
Ooh, what flavor of protein shake?
It's chocolate, but it's one of those like all in one, like all. It's not. It's I think it's like the Vega one, that where you get pretty much 50% of your nutrients for the day in only one cup. So I
Nice.
guess the day started the right way.
I have not heard of that, but I have got to try it because, yeah, I'm over here surviving off of coffee this morning and water. So if I start freaking out, guys, it's all me. So if you guys are watching here, just drop a comment. I'd love to see what you had for breakfast from wherever you are in the world. Some people are like, "Oh, this morning I had fish," and they were in Yugoslavia or something. It was wild. So Zeke, well, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'd love to kind of just before we hop into your slides and everything here is give me your background of who you are, what you've done, where you are, and then we're gonna hop straight into what you have to share with us and talking about attribution, the scary A word, as we call it.
Of course. Yeah. So my background, I was trained in economics, particularly econometrics, which is the study of cause and effect. And in the last few years, I became a data scientist. I studied machine learning in Stanford, and essentially, I've been spent the last 20 years in the digital space, helping companies make data-driven decisions. So building analytic systems, AI, machine learning systems, so they can take a ton of data, extract insights, and make the best decisions possible.
Love it. Awesome. And so, yeah, let's just hop into it. You can share your screen and we'll just go for it here. And if anybody has questions that's watching on YouTube or LinkedIn or here, just leave a comment. I'll be the arbiter of the comments here. I'm gonna ask my own comments just so I can learn as well. And we'll let you go for it, Zeke. So feel free share your screen and let's hop in.
Of course, yeah. I'll share a little bit about what got me to the this point in time, and I think it's going to be relevant to the conversation. Yeah, so I had a marketing agency that got acquired about 10 years ago, and what I noticed during that time is that all my clients had the same issue, which is they were running ads and doing all sorts of marketing in many different places. Then they had sales, but they couldn't really map those sales to marketing activities. So they had, their platforms provide information about how much revenue they were getting, but those numbers were really never adding up. And they found themselves not really knowing what to invest in. And that was essentially the what I realized with Data Speaks. There was so much data out there, but the platforms are not in a very good place to measure the revenue they're reporting. So what I want to share today is why that happens, why there are limitations to the way they track, and what the industry is recommending as the best practice. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here with you. Oh, that's not it. There we go.
All right. So there we go.
Awesome. So this is very eye-opening to people that see this stat for the first time, but budget allocation accounts for 65% of advertising performance. And there are three different independent studies by Nielsen, Quark, and the Boston Consulting Group that reveal that where you invest your money matters twice as much as optimizing the individual channels. In other words, if you have channels that are perfectly optimized, but you're investing the wrong amounts in the wrong channels and tactics, you're going to get really poor results. And this is really at the crux of the issue. We have a lot of platform data that is very useful to optimize each platform. So for example, within Google, we might have two different campaigns. One has a ROAS, return on ad spend, of 6, the other one 3. In relative terms, it's fair to say that the first is twice as good as the second. But we don't know if the 6 and the 3 are understated by 10x or overstated by 10x, and that's really the problem. And why this happens? Well, pixels are notoriously inaccurate. So they have a 50% error margin, and this is an actual case for one of our clients where we had Google remarketing and Facebook video ads. Google remarketing was claiming $100,000 in sales, which is twice as much as Facebook that is claiming 50. But in reality, Google was only providing $20,000 of incremental revenue versus Facebook was 90,000. And we could be the smartest marketers in the world and pay a lot of attention to our data, but if our data is wrong, it's going to lead us to the wrong conclusions and the wrong actions. And what we found that actually aligns with the different studies, they all reach the same conclusion, that is about a third of every ad dollar is being wasted. What that means is that if you are investing, let's say, $100,000 a month in ads, you could take that same money and reallocate it in a way that is going to provide 36% more revenue without you spending a dime more. So that's really the key kind of value proposition of getting this right. It's not about having the most accurate data possible, but as you always say in your videos and your content, is what we do with the data and what value it has to our business. In this case, it's about just making our dollars stretch as far as possible. So why is it that pixels are so unreliable? Well, nearly half of our devices prevent these pixels from tracking sales. So ad blockers, GDPR, CCPA, iOS devices, Firefox. If you have an iPhone, for example, most of your conversions are not being tracked. Then, because pixels don't really talk to each other, 53% of conversions are claimed by multiple channels. 39% of conversions aren't incremental, and they would have happened anyway. So maybe you sent an email announcing Labor Day 20% off. Anybody who was on Instagram the day before scrolling, maybe they scrolled through your ad, they didn't even notice it, but because they saw your ad, Instagram is going to claim credit for that sale. 17% of all advertising is on channels that pixels can track, such as audio and TV. 40% of all sales online happen outside websites. So it could be Amazon, Walmart, Target, retail, and so on. 85% of shoppers start the conversion journey on one device and they complete it on a different device, making that sale enabled to be traced back to the source. Attribution windows. This is a really big one that really skews our data. So by default, most platforms have a 7-day click, 1-day view attribution window. So that means that if somebody found you 8 days ago, 10 days ago, those touch points are not going to be counted. So what happens is there's a lot of bias towards more recent activity in the last click. And the top of the funnel is severely misrepresented. And what we found is that the bottom of the funnels, which is usually brand search, retargeting, is overstated by 3 to 6 times, whereas mid-funnel is understated by 4 times, and top of funnel sometimes by 15 to 35 times. So what ends up happening if we invest based on platform data is that we are targeting the same customers over and over again, and a lot of those were going to buy in the same. They were going to buy anyway, and we're just targeting them over and over again, not getting any incremental sales. And the platforms are essentially targeting people that they know are going to purchase. Now, we've talked about the problem quite a bit. What do we do about it? There's actually no questions in the industry that the new standard is unified measurement. So there's actually consensus among all the big platforms that the pixels are really helpful for them to figure out who's buying and based on what ads, but they can't be a reliable source of truth. There's also no debate among them either that the path forward is unified measurement. And this is based on 3 different pillars, which are attribution, media mix modeling, and incrementality testing. This same framework goes by different names, but has the exact 3 components. So Meta calls it measurement 360. Google calls it modern measurement, and TikTok calls it holistic measurement. We call it True North because we feel like that's what helps us get to the right place in the most direct path possible. But it's the same framework. Everybody is using different names, but it's important to know that there's consensus about, this is the way to give us full coverage about the performance of our media. So I want to go into each of these 3 components. So first we have attribution that essentially helps us follow individuals across different channels and devices. So in this case, we could see we have Meta, we have Shopify, we have Klaviyo and email marketing software, Google Ads, and so on. And then we have different activities across different devices, phone, desktop, and so on. So being able to unify all this data into a single view of the customer journey helps us understand the full picture. The other aspect of attribution is when we use first-party data as opposed to the third-party pixels that the platforms give us, those are not blocked by half of our devices. So 100% of the activity and conversions are being tracked. And the key to this is when we're able to track more conversions, then we're giving platforms twice as much data so their algorithms can perform at their best. They can target the right people, the right ads at the right time. The other beautiful thing about this is that we can build audiences that are based on activity across multiple channels. So for example, in this case, we're looking at people that view hockey products on our website and clicked emails about hockey and clicked ads on Facebook about hockey. And then we can export that audience and target them on Google or TikTok. This is something that we couldn't do natively on the platform because Google doesn't have access to Meta's data and vice versa. Then we have media mix modeling, which is the most effective and practical way to measure advertising performance. So I have a couple of screenshots here that I think illustrate the key aspects of media mix modeling. The first one is we have the ROI by media with confidence intervals. So this is really, really important because we grown accustomed to, this is the ROI, this is the ROI. The reality is that there's no tool out there or method that even exists that would help us understand reality with 100% certainty. So we have to understand what degree of probability and certainty we have in some data to decide how bullish or cautious we want to be with our actions. So we have one case here where the numbers are maybe too small for you to see in the screen, but I'll just tell you right here, like a Facebook top of funnel, we have ROAS of 6.4. and then 90, but we're 95% certain that is between 6.1 and 6.6. And because it's such a narrow confidence interval, chances are that, whether it's 6.1 or 6.6, it wouldn't change the decision we make. It's still profitable, like the numbers work. And it's really important to see that. But there's other cases where, we have Google demand gen, where the ROAS is 1.2, but could be between 0.7 and 1.6. Now, that might be the difference between something that is losing money and making money. So as media buyers, it's really important that we understand not only what the ROAS is expected to be, but also how sure we are that it's within that range. Another key aspect of media mix modeling is that we can understand the diminishing returns of our media. As we all know, when we start increasing the budget for a certain campaign, at one point we're going to start getting diminishing returns. And we could see two different charts here. On the left, we see budget versus profit, and on the right, budget versus ROAS. So starting at the left, what we see is that as we increase spend from left to right, profit starts going up, and there's a point of optimal profit. That means, the spend level at which we can maximize how much profit we get, and then starts going down. So we want to be at the top of the hill, basically. If we are to the left, we need to increase budget. If we are to the right, we need to scale down. And then this is very useful as well on the right to see the spend versus ROI. So how does the ROI decrease over time? We could see multiple different kinds of media layered on top of each other to see which ones drop off the fastest. Because what happens very often is you can have, say, channel A, channel B. At this point in time, it makes much more sense to scale channel A because it has a higher ROI. But if you start doing that enough, there's going to be a point where the channel B is actually going to be where the next dollar is going to do better. And it's really important to know that, because what's going to work to get you from, say, $1 million to $5 million in monthly revenue is not the same that it's going to get you from 5 to 10 or 10 to 20. So it's really important to know how different media scales. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to, what should I do? What action should I take based on all this data? So these recommendations help us understand that. So what do we increase? What do we decrease? By how much? And what we can expect. So in this case, for example, it's recommending increasing spend by $21,000 per month, which would result in $80,000 of additional revenue. And we could see what the profit and the ROAS is. And there are certain times when we are spending too much on certain things and we need to scale down.
Dick, how do you handle the idea of the elasticity of the ability to spend? Because sometimes you'll look at these things, right? And it's like, oh, you should spend, let's just say, $100,000 more on Meta, like by the numbers, right? But like your creative department can't, right? Like you need more creative, or like you need more hooks, or you need more angles. Like if you spend more money, like either Facebook will penalize you, where those dollars become less efficient, right? Through like Meta's thing. So what was true at the spending $10,000 a day is not true at spending $20,000 a day. In conjunction with the idea of like other platforms having more demand, or having more ability to spend more without having to change anything. Like, how do you handle those kind of relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. So you touched on three different things. So one is understanding what these they're called response curves look like. So what you're 100% right. Like your ROI at 10,000 a day versus 20,000, 30,000 is going to change. The other thing is, if you never spend $30,000 a day, that's going to be modeled, and the confidence interval is going to be very narrow for data that you already have, but it's going to get wider for data that you don't have, and the model is extrapolating from past data from. So that's really important to know, that you can start with, we always say is scale. We usually say 5% week over week, and just kind of start finding the right spot. So that's really important to know, that do you have the data? Do you have the confidence interval? And then at what point does it, like we've seen channels that have a ROAS of maybe 3, which is not, huge, but could, be scaled pretty much indefinitely. I mean, theoretically, that you always get to a point of diminishing returns, but there's so much more demand to be captured. Whereas you have other channels that maybe have a ROAS of 6 if you're only spending $1,000 a week, but then you go to 2,000 and it just like goes to 3, and then you go to 3,000, it's like, you're losing money. So it's really important to know that. Then there's also the other issue that you brought up, which is like any kind of constraints you might have in terms of producing creative, or sometimes like strategically, some of these recommendations might not align with your business strategy. So I think that it's really important that we use data to help us aid our decisions, but at the end of the day, we should be running the bus. We are in charge of the decisions we make. We know what strategy makes sense for us. What we do for our clients is we run multiple scenarios based on what they say it's best for them. So one example could be, what if my budget is fixed? I can't spend more than I'm spending now. What is the best way to reallocate that existing budget to achieve a certain ROI? Another scenario is like, what if we could increase up to 50%? And then if you can increase to 50%, what are you going to prioritize? The ROI for each media, or the ROI total, knowing that all these channels are interacting with each other? And for example, as you do more YouTube, TikTok, top of funnel, Meta top of funnel, that's going to then feed, retargeting and brand search and so on. So that's kind of where a strategic conversation needs to happen to figure out what is our objective, and based on what we know about our historical data, what is the optimal way to allocate this mix to reach that objective.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it, because it keeps the in general, we notice that like the conversation, it oftentimes is like around demand that we deal with, of like, hey, we need to spend more money on these things, and in order to spend that more money, it's like a different constraint, right? It's a creative constraint. It's like a fulfillment constraint. And so like oftentimes like we run these models, and it's like, hey, you should spend more on this. And they're like, yeah, like if we spend more money on that, it's going to become less efficient because we don't have enough creative at the same volume that we could. Like, and so I don't know, it's interesting. Like those are the conversations we have a lot. That's why I'm asking you, is like, we have those conversations a lot of the time where it's not necessarily like the data says, it's like we have other constraints that are not necessarily like tied into the model. And so, yeah, it's super interesting.
Absolutely. And I think that's really, really important, right? Like we, to be very clear on what the objectives are and what the constraints might be, and to use that into our modeling. This is one lens through which we look at the business, and it's optimized to maximize the output, the amount of profit. Now, you can have, maybe, that will require a level of like producing creatives that it's impossible, or like maybe you don't have the inventory, or maybe, this is just like one aspect of it, which is like optimizing the media mix to maximize demand at a profitable level. But yeah, of course, any other constraints that we have about our businesses should come into play, should be part of the conversation.
Awesome.
And then the other thing that we always say is a model that can be validated, can be trusted. What I mean by that is, a model produces a certain hypothesis. It's never the truth. I think it's really important that we acknowledge that. The model will say, we're 95%. There's a 95% chance that if you increase this by 10,000, your spend by 10,000, your revenue will increase by 90,000. And then you have to put it to the test. So there are two ways we could do this. So we show it by media, and then aggregated. So by media, essentially, you're seeing an increase in spend here that is corresponded with the color blue. That means that it's resulting in more profit. And then you decrease the spend, and it gets red, meaning that you shouldn't be decreasing, you should be increasing. So that's really important to measure that by media. The other thing is the overall accuracy of the prediction. So at any given time, most likely you're not just making one change, but you're making 3 or 4 or 5 changes. So if what we always say is that how we determine the quality of a model is by its ability to predict the future based on past data. So maybe it's scenarios never seen before. You increase TikTok by 10% and increase Meta by 15% and decrease Google by 20%. What would that happen? So the model should give you a prediction of what's going to happen under those circumstances, and then you check the actual versus the prediction, and that's essentially the foundation of how the model works. The model is not going to get it right every time. It's going to make a prediction. It's going to then take in new data, and it's going to adjust the predictions accordingly, because our media is not performing the same now as it was 2 years ago. The world is always changing. Our campaigns are changing. Our customers are changing. There's more competition. All that stuff is always being updated, and a model should always be learning from the world. And the final component here is incrementality. So this is essentially the ability to run geographical experiments where we subject certain states or geographic areas to one treatment and others to a different treatment. So what I mean by that is there's this concept in econometrics called ceteris paribus, which is all other things being equal. So what we say is, if at any given point in time, everybody is exposed to the same social media posts, the same prices, the same promotions, the same time of the year, and so on. And the only difference is that some markets don't see your ads and others see your ads. Then you're isolating the effect of that particular element. And there are 2 ways to do that. So one is to do a holdout experiment, and a holdout essentially says we're going to pause our channels in these states, and then we measure how much sales drop, and that's essentially the lift that was being delivered by those channels. Another one is to do a scale up, where we say, in this case, we're going to increase spend by 25% in those particular states and see how much sales increase for those states. And I want to give a kind of a rundown of, we have 3 different tools. What are the pros, cons for each, right? So starting with media mix modeling, it's ideal for measuring media impact, so revenue and ROI, and to plan budget allocation, which is how much to spend for each media, how much revenue you're going to get back, ROI, diminishing returns, and so on. Attribution is for understanding individual customer journeys and optimizing channels, which is essentially creatives and audiences. Incrementality testing is to measure media impact, which is revenue and ROI. This is also important to know that attribution is the only one that tracks users, so JJ, Zeke, Jane, anybody, right? We're tracking individuals, whereas media mix modeling and incrementality testing are used on aggregated data. So spend by state, by media, per day or per week. The strengths of each. So MMM is very, very accurate and very practical, because you don't have to run experiments. You already have the data. You have revenue data from your e-commerce or Amazon, and then you have your spend data from your platform. So you have the data, you just need the model. So it's really easy. It's also very privacy friendly. Attribution is great for user level insights. And this is actually really interesting. Prior to AI, I had this as a limitation rather than a pro. But now with AI, we can get so much insight from all these customer journeys. And what I mean by that is, if you have, let's say, 1,000 different conversions, most likely you have like 900 different conversion paths. And it's really time consuming to go through each one and see, what each user did and try to figure it out. With AI, you can essentially query that unstructured data in a way that you get those patterns to be very clear very fast. So you could say, how do people usually find me? It's like, oh, they find you on videos from Instagram and YouTube, and what do they do next? They do this and this and this. So AI is really, really good at that and has made attribution much more useful than it was in the past. Incrementality testing, then the strength is that it's the most accurate of all these, is what scientists use. The randomized controlled trials is the foundation of the scientific method. Now, they all have limitations. So media mix modeling, you don't have any user level insights. You require very large data samples, usually 1,000 conversions per month or more. And it's also very complex and hard to master. What I always say is that there's a lot of, like open source packages that you can use, and you're always going to get an output. It might be correct. It might be directionally correct. It's not always clear whether that's the case or not, unless you are, or have at least a data scientist take a look at it and potentially troubleshoot some issues. So there's a little bit of complexity with that, but if you get that taken care of, it's going to be very, very powerful. Attribution, well, it's unreliable for revenue and ROI measurement. So you couldn't use it. If I know that you clicked on this Google ad and Facebook ad, and then this email and then this and that, how am I going to go about and say, it's 25% to the first touch point, 50% to the last one? Any kind of, arbitrary rule set that we apply is obviously not based on any sort of science. It's just, if we get to decide what it is, then, there's no, validity to it. But it's very good for, understanding individual users, right? So that's the trade-off. First-party tracking, very, very, very important, but it's also that it comes with some complexity, and then you have to do identity resolution to know that this device and this other device belong to the same person. So there's a little bit of setup there. None of this is prohibitive, but yeah, these are some of the challenges that come with it. With incrementality testing, the challenges are, one, you're getting a snapshot in time. So knowing if you run the test in October, for example, that's how things were performing back in the day. It doesn't mean that that's how it's always going to be. Also, there's always residual effects of past media. So if you pause, if you've been running a channel for like 2 months or 3 months, and then you just pause it, it's not like the effect is just going to disappear overnight. You're going to get some residual effect of past media. And the other one is that it ignores the interactions between channels. So there's a difference between saying, I'm just going to pause this one thing and I'm going to analyze the impact of that, but that might also impact other stuff. So we talked about TikTok impacting remarketing, right? So pausing one helps us isolate the effect of that media, whereas with media mix modeling, it's measuring the effect of that media within the larger picture and your entire channel mix. It's also important to know that all these these 3 different tools work in conjunction. So with MMM, we identified channels and tactics that we want to run incrementality tests on, and helps us adjust our attribution. So for example, if we have let's say 20 campaigns in Google Performance Max, and the ROAS, combined ROAS for that, according to the platform, is 3, but then in our media mix modeling, we realize it's 6. We know that it's understated by 50%. So we have to adjust everything and double it. So it helps us take that platform data and make it much more accurate by multiplying it by the coefficient that we get in the MMM. And incrementality testing then helps us calibrate our MMM, right? So as we run these experiments, we use that data to feed it back to the MMM and keep it as accurate as possible. Some practical recommendations. So we say for MMM, once a month, optimize allocation. Just look at the recommendations, make those changes. Once a week, monitor the results. Attribution, monthly, just pause or scale existing campaigns, and then launch new campaigns based on what's worked in the past. Once a week, monitor results. For incrementality, once a quarter, test any media representing 10% of your budget, and testing any given media twice a year. That's plenty. You don't need more than that.
What do you do, not to like throw a wrench into this, how do you handle when there's like CRO happening on a website, for example? Like a lot of these assume like the everything else be true, right? Like in the sense of like geo holdout and incrementality, and even somewhat to the effect of like mixed media modeling and attribution. It all, conversion rate is like probably the biggest through line in all of these of like, how does your site normally perform? How do you handle that? Like if you have a CRO team or a person that's like running A/B tests on like the product pages or the home pages in conjunction with all of this other stuff?
Yeah. So anything that is a non-media aspect can be modeled as well. So not only conversion rate optimization, but also, seasonality. Maybe you ran out of stock. Maybe you had promotions. Maybe, tariffs were announced, or there's COVID. There's a lot of things that will throw a wrench in our data. And what we can do about it is essentially feed the model that information. And then what the model is going to try to do is allocate. So what's going to happen is two things, right? So we have media-driven purchases, and then we have what we call baseline, which is organic. So even if you stop all your ads tomorrow, you're still going to have some sales. And that's what we call baseline sales, which we then, submodel into, email, affiliates, and so on. Both the baseline and the media performance are going to increase, assuming you've done a good job with conversion rate optimization. So, for example, if you're running ads on Meta towards a better performing landing page, your Meta performance is going to improve because of that. But also the traffic from organic channels is going to improve as well. So what we do is we just give the model information such as, we launched, like reorganized the website, or we did a promotion, or we ran out of stock, and then let the model figure out how much of that difference in effect has to do with that particular thing. I think it's also really important to acknowledge that it's not going to get it exactly right, and that's one of the conversations that I have with our clients all the time is like, just because something is not 100% right 100% of the time, it doesn't mean that the data itself is worthless, so it's essentially helping us make the best decision possible. And it's much better than any other thing out there, but it's not going to capture 100% of every effect perfectly. So I think that's one of the keys to modeling. To essentially what modeling is saying, based on all these different inputs, help me figure out how we achieve this output. And the more we teach the model about these inputs, different things that happen in our business, in the world, that could potentially affect the output, the better the model is going to do in figuring out how much of that is related to each of those inputs.
Got it. Nice.
All right, so I will be happy to take any questions. I think
Yeah.
let me check the time. Let me stop sharing here.
You're all good. On YouTube, somebody asked, what does it look like when you apply this to smaller budgets? Like, how does it, like, what's the budget threshold that you'd think applying any of this is worth it from a either cost of implementation perspective or a cost of doing perspective or the actual result that you'll get?
We say if you're spending less than 10,000 a month, you don't need any of this. If you spend between 10 and 25,000, get attribution figured out and use AI to feed those journeys and just like do a little bit of use your intuition with that. If you're spending I would say 50,000 or more, you certainly have to start thinking about media mix modeling. If you're spending 100K or more, incrementality is a must as well.
Love it. Question for you from me is, this is hot. I don't have any dog in this fight, so do not hesitate to say it's terrible, it's amazing, or good, bad, or ugly. What do you think of Google Analytics? Like, where do you think that fits in? Does it fit at all? Like, should you use it? Like, what's the Google Analytics take from Zeke?
I love Google Analytics. I think it's important to remember what Google Analytics is, which is a website tracking tool. And what I mean by that is it's not going to be an attribution tool. It's not a measurement tool that will help you figure out, like, out of all these different things, like what affected what. It's going to give you most of the time last click data. So for attribution, it's not the right tool. However, there's a lot of things that I really like about Google Analytics. First of all, it's free, right? So we, it's right out of the box. We have something valuable that doesn't cost anything. So every business should have it. And it helps us understand quite a bit for those first few chapters of our growth. So stuff like our demographics and how people engage with our website and what pages they visit and how they navigate that's huge. And I think that most people that are not tech savvy can probably watch 3-4 hours worth of your content or tutorials online and just get the basics of a couple of reports that can help you figure out how people interact with your website. So yeah, I'm a big fan. I think that people used to like the all Google Analytics more than the GA4. I'm actually a big fan of GA4 because it provides more out of the box. But I also understand that it's a little less user friendly. But with a little bit of a customization, you can get a lot of what you need.
Yeah. The way I always frame it is like when they went to GA4, they definitely moved more towards like product analytics. It looks like, I think it's very similar, like the mixed panels and those types of things, which is a different vibe, I guess, for lack of better terms, than like the traditional Google Analytics, like universal analytics back in the day. So great. Well, thank you so much, Zeke. It's been awesome to hear kind of like the differences in those like mixed media versus increment, like how you think about those combinations. Because we talk about those things with clients all the time, and different platforms. So if someone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can find me on LinkedIn. Also Zeke, Zeke at dataspeaks.ai. They want to learn more about DataSpeaks. That's DataSpeaks AI. What my personal mission is to leave things better than I found them. A lot of people have helped me in my career. Agreed to provide advice, meet with me for coffee. So any opportunity I have to repay that, no matter where you are, like maybe you're just getting started and you just want to run ideas by someone, I'm here to help and be a resource to the community.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Zeke. It's been a pleasure chatting. And anybody else, if you have any questions, do not hesitate. email me, email Zeke, ask the question. We'll make sure that you get sorted and where you should be going from here on out. So have a great one, and we'll see you guys in the next one.